I recently had the chance to go on an unforgettable 9-night cruise in Royal Caribbean's Liberty of the Seas. We did this to celebrate our daughter graduating high school. We had so much fun exploring the ship, enjoying the activities, and sampling the great food offered on this trip. In this video, I'll give you an overview of my experience on the ship and share with you both the things that I loved and the things that I didn't love so much. So sit back, relax, and let me give you the inside scoop of my cruise on Royal Caribbean's Liberty of the Seas. For this cruise, we departed from Bayonne, New Jersey. Sailing from Bayonne is very convenient since we live 3 hours away in Maryland and didn't incur the added expense of flying to a port located on the East Coast in either Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Port Canaveral, or traveling to Galveston, Texas. The last time we departed from Bayonne was in December, and I wasn't that big of a fan. I didn't enjoy departing from Bayonne during the colder months of the year. For this trip that left June 1st, the weather was perfect, and we didn't spend half of our cruise in lousy cold weather. I also appreciated the iconic monuments of the surrounding area in Bayonne, with us passing near the Statue of Liberty, Coney Island, the Teardrop Memorial, and passing under the Verrazano Bridge. No other port that Royal Caribbean uses can compete with these significant landmarks. Now that we safely departed, our attention turned to enjoying this 9-night cruise. We usually board the ship already wearing our swimsuits or having them available to change into in a small carry-on bag. It is important to bring the necessities that you may need since you will not immediately have access to your luggage or your stateroom. We bring a small carry-on bag that typically consists of sunscreen and usually dry clothes to change into. We headed straight to the pool where we grabbed some towels, lounge chairs, and started enjoying this trip right away. Shortly after enjoying the pool, I noticed that I was hungry and it was lunchtime, so I began looking in the Royal Caribbean app for available food options on this ship. My first choice was Windjammer, Royal Caribbean's buffet restaurant, but the app indicated that it would not be opening until 5 p.m. Since the pool was close to Windjammer, I walked over to confirm that this was accurate, and surprisingly, Windjammer was open and available to the guests. This was the first of several times the Royal Caribbean app would not be accurate on this cruise. In recent years, Royal Caribbean has transitioned to primarily using Royal Caribbean app for guests to receive their cruise information to include daily activities, shows, and schedules. I typically ask the room attendant to place a printed copy in our room each evening for the next day's events, as I enjoy that more than having to always navigate the schedule within the app. And on this trip, it was fairly common for the Royal Caribbean app to be missing events or just be wrong. I found several activities that I wanted to participate in that were not listed within the app, but I was able to find them on the printed version, and the printed version was accurate when I went to those events. After eating lunch and lounging by the pool, the captain came over the PA system and announced that our staterooms were now available for us to access. This was sometime around 2 or 3 p.m. We headed to our stateroom, and for this trip, we had an ocean view balcony. A big change from our previous cruises was that Royal Caribbean had now transitioned to once-a-day turn-down service. They began this implementation in January of 2023. When we met our room attendant, he asked us what time we would like our turn-down service each day. It was nice that it was not random and we were able to choose when turn-down service was going to happen, but I still would prefer the twice a day that I had grown accustomed to. We decided on 5:30 p.m. since that was our main dining room time and knew we would be absent from the room each day at this time. The room itself was what you would expect from an ocean view balcony. Nothing fancy since the ship has been sailing since 2007. My biggest complaint regarding the rooms on Liberty of the Seas is the lack of power outlets near the master bed. The only power outlets are on the room vanity, and I noticed this in February when we sailed on Liberty and then again on this cruise. The newer ships have more outlets available in more locations. The only issue we experienced in the room was that the bathroom sink was not draining very well and would tend to fill when the water was turned on. We notified maintenance and they took care of the issue right away when we were not in the room, and the sink worked fine for the rest of the trip. Earlier, I briefly mentioned our main dining room time was at 5:30 p.m. There were 3 dining options for the main dining room on this cruise. You could have had 5:30 p.m., 8 p.m., or tried your hand at My Time Dining. For those that don't know, My Time Dining is an option where you do not have a dedicated dining time, but instead show up each day around when you want to eat and wait in line for availability. We have never tried My Time Dining, and in theory it sounds like it would be nice to eat when you want, but in reality there's a lot of uncertainty about being able to get into the main dining room when you want, and I often saw long lines of people waiting to eat. We prefer the set dining time for the certainty, but also it's nice having the same 2 servers each evening that you can get to know over the course of your trip. With regards to the dining room itself, I really did enjoy the atmosphere and look of it. It's a classical cruise ship dining room that seems reminiscent of what you saw in the movie Titanic. We have experienced some more modern dining rooms, such as Anthem of the Seas, and we personally prefer the more classical look. In case you were not aware, Royal Caribbean revamped their main dining room menus around the first of the year, and now each evening comes with a different theme. Since this was a 9-night cruise, we did get to try all of the themed evenings. They included Welcome Aboard, A Taste of France, A Taste of the UK, A Taste of the USA, A Taste of the Caribbean, A Taste of Mexico, A Taste of Italy, The Royal Night, and Bon Voyage. With regards to this trip, the meals started off mediocre for the first few days, but somewhere around day 4 or 5, the main dining room dinner quality seemed to take a precipitous step up. Surprisingly, the theme night that I was least excited for, A Taste of Mexico, ended up being one of the best dinners served during this trip. The pulled pork enchilada was perfect, the portion was massive, and the flavor was great. The dessert on that evening of the warm chocolate chip cookie and ice cream was also my favorite of the trip. I was expecting them to use the same chocolate chip cookies they serve in the Cafe Promenade, but that was not the case, and this chocolate chip cookie was exceptional, very warm and soft, and the vanilla ice cream was a perfect complement to it. Another change that Royal Caribbean has adopted is no longer allowing more than one lobster tail on the Royal Night without incurring an additional charge. Each lobster tail after the first one will be charged at $16.99. We had 4 of us on this trip: myself, my wife Megan, our daughter Katie, and her boyfriend Gavin. I forced them to critique each of their dinners in the MDR each day and score them from 1 to 10. If you want the comprehensive main dining room critiques of each of our dinners, I put together a separate video since it would take too long to include in this video. As for destinations on this trip, we had 4 port days. The first was a stop in Bermuda, followed by a stop at Royal Caribbean's private island Labadee, Haiti, and then concluding with 2 stops in the Dominican Republic at La Romana and Puerto Plata, which is also referred to as Tano Bay. All of these stops were brand new for us, so we were excited to see what they were like. The first stop was the Royal Naval Dockyard in Bermuda. Prior to this trip, we did some research, and looking at the available excursions, we're very interested in the Aquarium and Crystal Caves tour that was listed in the Royal Caribbean app. However, we were not thrilled at the price being $164.99 per person, for a total of $659.96 plus 18% gratuity. So with the gratuity added, it would have came out to $778.75. It sounded a bit too steep for what this excursion was offering. After my wife Megan did a little more research online, we concluded that we could go and see the Crystal Caves on our own without booking the Royal Caribbean sponsored excursion. When it comes to booking excursions for a Royal Caribbean cruise, you will always pay a premium booking with Royal Caribbean, but all the planning will be taken care of for you. In addition, you get the added security that the ship will not leave without you, even if your excursion does not make it back before the scheduled departure time. Royal Caribbean will hold a ship for any excursion that is booked through them. If you find yourself stranded on the side of a road somewhere because, for example, your bus broke down, Royal Caribbean will wait for all those passengers to make it to the ship. If you decide to go out on your own adventure and opt to not book with Royal Caribbean, then it will be your responsibility to ensure you make it back to the ship on time. And Royal Caribbean will not wait for you if issues arise. It will ultimately boil down to your comfort level of doing something on your own or relying on Royal Caribbean to take care of everything for you. For us, we were willing to venture out on our own, and boy, am I glad we did so. We were able to take a 45-minute taxi ride to Crystal Caves, and then we purchased entry into the caves for $40 a person or $160 total. The taxi ride was about $45 each way, so $90 total. So instead of the $778.75 we would have paid with Royal Caribbean, we paid around $250 total, but we also got to see some additional sites and go on our own adventures that we would not have had the opportunity to do with the Royal Caribbean excursion that is very strict about not deviating from its planned itinerary. Regarding the Crystal Caves, they were absolutely beautiful. We managed to arrive earlier than the Royal Caribbean buses, so we actually had a private tour with just the 4 of us and our tour guide. Once we were finished, there was a group of about 40 people, which were a booked excursion that was waiting to tour the caves. Not only did we pay less, but we had our own private tour with 4 of us instead of a large group of around 40 people. Once we completed our tour of Crystal Caves, it was still pretty early in the day. It was probably around 10 a.m., and we wanted to see more of what Bermuda had to offer. So we asked the employees at Crystal Caves if there was something in the surrounding area that we could walk to or maybe take a taxi to that would be good for us to see. What was suggested to us was something called Blue Hole Park, which is about a half a mile away. So they gave us the instructions of how to walk there, and we actually chose to walk there on our own. Once we arrived at Blue Hole Park, it was something that we had never heard of, but we actually discovered that it was actually very cool and a lot of fun to actually explore it. What Blue Hole Park was it was a series of little lagoons and caves that you could either have a tour guide take you around, because we saw some other groups that were getting shown around by these tour guides, or you could just explore it on your own, which is what we did. We managed to find some pretty exotic caves and walk in there and explore them. You could even go swimming in them if you wanted to. So this is something that we had no idea we were even going to do when we started our day, but we ended up doing it. It was actually a lot of fun, and we got a lot of great pictures from it. So that was definitely a plus in terms of doing something on your own versus a booked excursion with Royal Caribbean. Once we finished exploring Blue Hole Park, it was around 12 p.m., or in our case, time to find some lunch. From talking to our taxi driver earlier, he mentioned something to us called a rum swizzle, which is the national drink of Bermuda. Earlier near the Crystal Caves, we noticed a restaurant called the Swizzle Inn. From talking to our taxi driver from the morning, he also had recommended this restaurant if we wanted to get a bite to eat. We ended up walking the half a mile back to the Swizzle Inn and had a delicious lunch that included the rum swizzle pitcher for the four of us to share. This was actually the first legal drink our daughter was able to order since she is 18 and the drinking age in Bermuda is 18. Royal Caribbean ships follow the drinking age of the port that you depart from, so in our case, since we left from New Jersey, she cannot order alcoholic beverages on the ship. As for my meal, I ordered the Blue Hole fish sandwich. It was described as grilled wahoo coated in island seasoning, spicy slaw, lettuce, tomato, and tartar sauce on sesame bun. And it said on the menu, you'll need a photo of this one. The price for this was $22.50. When my food arrived, it was everything I hoped it would be. It was superior to any meal I had eaten on our cruise up to this point. This ended up becoming a common theme on our trip. We routinely ate at restaurants on our various stops, and each restaurant seemed to have food that was superior to the flavors and quality we received on the ship. Once we finished our lunch at the Swizzle Inn, we had one more stop we wanted to make on our way back to the ship. My wife had wanted to see Horseshoe Bay Beach, which is a well known beach that you could book as an excursion if you chose to, but again, this was something we were going to do on our own. We hopped in a taxi and headed towards Horseshoe Bay, which was in the direction of the ship anyway. Something we read about regarding Horseshoe Bay was that it had pink sand. While you couldn't see pink sand when you first look at the beach, you definitely notice it when you get close to it. This was a beautiful beach that would be a wonderful spot to spend your day in Bermuda if you wanted to just relax and enjoy a beach. For us, it was a nice quick stop that we spent about 45 minutes at, and then we got to hop in a taxi and return to our ship. Having completed the first of our 4 port days, we were now headed to destination number 2, which would be Labadee, Haiti. The interesting thing about this cruise is that it starts off with 3 sea days, followed by 4 consecutive port days, and then 2 more sea days. Often you go on cruises and have 1 or 2 port days in a row, but usually have a sea day in between stops. I don't really have a preference either way, but given that we left from New Jersey, this is probably how it needed to go in order to work out. Labadee, Haiti is another port that we have never visited before. This is one of the 2 private ports that Royal Caribbean has, Perfect Day at Coco Cay being the other. The first thing I noticed when I got up in the morning was simply how beautiful the views are as we pulled into Labadee. The area was a tropical paradise that has an exterior perimeter around it of a vast mountain terrain. One of the things to note is that any excursions booked at Haiti have to be done through Royal Caribbean. This is not like other locations where you can choose to do it on your own. You are not allowed to even leave the location as it's deemed not safe to venture outside of the confines of this private Royal Caribbean area. Labadee has several main areas that consist of Buccaneers Bay, Dragons Plaza, Barefoot Beach Club, Nelly's Beach, Columbus Cove, Town Square, and Adrenaline Beach, which has a massive zip line over the water. Since this was our first visit, we divided our time among several different locations to try and get a feel for the entire area. Adrenaline Beach was our first spot. Walking on your way to your destinations, you'll find a lot of local Haitians that are employed on this private island. They're very eager to help you find a seat or provide advice in hopes of receiving a monetary tip for their services. Once you arrive at Adrenaline Beach, there's a zip line that goes above the water that is simply amazing. But with regards to the price, it was approximately $120 some for one run of the zip line. The price will vary from cruise to cruise, but it's generally in that price range. I would suggest a different zipline excursion that consists of 8 zip lines for a much lower price point in the Dominican Republic that I'll get to later in this video. Another thing to note is that this location does not have Royal Caribbean towel stands throughout the island. They have one towel stand immediately when you get off the ship, and if you do not take advantage of this, you will find yourself walking way back towards the ship to get towels. I myself was a victim of this mistake. Another common sight as you walk around Labadee is that you will see lots of wild dogs roaming around. All of them seemed extremely friendly and were often just napping in the shade. As we hopped around the beaches, we stumbled into something called Town Square. Town Square is a market area that is similar to other ports, with the difference being that the store operators are extremely aggressive at trying to get you to enter into and then buy something from their store. We often like to look at market stores, but when someone is trying to coerce you into entering, it's just a big turnoff, and it prevented us from actually going into any of the stores. I know I said it briefly in the beginning, but it needs to be stated again. The views here on Labadee are absolutely amazing. Every beach we went to had a different, equally as impressive view of the surrounding area. The water was very warm, which is always nice. The only downside to the water was that we noticed and heard many other guests comment about being stung by jellyfish. I encountered a few of them, and it wasn't really jellyfish stings, but rather jellyfish larvae, which feels a lot less severe than a full-blown jellyfish sting. I have no idea if these are present year-round, but they definitely took away from what was otherwise the best-looking beaches we had ever gone to. I actually had an allergic reaction about 10 days after this visit that I suspect was related to the jellyfish larva, also known as sea lice, but I have no way of confirming that for sure. As for dining options on the island, they seem to be rather basic and underwhelming. I absolutely love the expansive buffets of Coco Cay, so I was hoping the offering on Labadee would be somewhat similar. Unfortunately, this just simply wasn't the case. There's nothing wrong with the available food, but the disappointing part for me was that all of the fruit and desserts had a massive amount of flies landing and resting on them. They should probably keep them covered or have fans to keep them from landing on the food. This was pretty much our day in Labadee. Impressive surrounding views with beautiful beaches, nice warm water, and a couple of minor issues that would otherwise make this experience top-notch. Had it not been for the flies on the food, the jellyfish stings, or the pushy market operators, I would have no complaints regarding this destination. The beaches and views make this a destination we would definitely enjoy visiting again. The third stop on this cruise was our first of 2 days spent in the Dominican Republic. For the first Dominican Republic stop, we ported in La Romana. Waking up in the morning was a good experience, hearing the local musicians playing as we docked. I also really enjoyed that nearby I could see a baseball field. Dominican Republic is a hotbed for baseball talent, and Major League Baseball has a ton of players that derive from this island. For this particular port stop, we booked an excursion called Altos de Chavan. This excursion included a bus that would take us across town to a faux historic area. It was a pretty area to tour, but wasn't actually historic, but was rather constructed to look historic. Either way, it was a pretty area and was nice to get out and walk around for the day. While in the area, we had some really good overlooking views of the Chavan River, which was used for the filming of Rambo 2. We had a tour guide that walked us around and provided commentary, and at the end, we were able to explore on our own for about an hour and a half. We decided to spend our time trying some of the local cuisine at a restaurant in the village we were touring. I don't remember the name of the location, but it was absolutely delicious. We really enjoy trying restaurants in the ports we visit, and almost always leave completely satisfied with the meals we experience. My recommendation, if it's in your budget, is to try restaurants in various ports that are not necessarily just the provided food offered on the ship. After our lunch, we got back on our bus and traveled to a local market where we walked around and explored the different offerings in a Dominican Republic market. 2 items stood out to me as something I wanted to try that was authentic to Dominican Republic, and that was the local vanilla and the local chocolate. The chocolate was fairly expensive, with it being $8.50 for a single chocolate bar. The vanilla, on the other hand, was extremely cheap. I bought a fairly large bottle of vanilla for $4. I'm used to paying more than $4 for a tiny little McCormick bottle at the supermarkets in the United States. My daughter enjoyed looking at the various jewelry offered, and the price of the jewelry was very reasonable. After the market, we hopped back on our bus and headed back to our ship. All in all, this excursion was enjoyable since we got off the ship, walked around, ate at a local restaurant, and explored a local market. On our final port day, which was also Dominican Republic, but a different location, we stopped at Puerto Plata, also referred to as Taino Bay. For this excursion, we had our most exciting excursion booked on this trip. It was a zip line excursion that included traveling on 8 different zip lines, with the longest one being over half a mile long. We paid right around $80 per person, and this is why I suggested bypassing the Dragon's Breath zip line in Labadee, which was over $100 per person for one zip line, and choose something similar to this in the Dominican Republic, which was a lot more for less money. The bus ride to the zipline location was around 45 minutes, but was very enjoyable. We had the opportunity to see a lot of the Dominican Republic landscape and witness a busy weekday morning for many locals in the area. Something that is extremely popular in the Dominican Republic is transportation by motorcycle or moped. It was common to see a family of 4 somehow fit on a small moped and travel around the area. Once we arrived at our destination, the zipline adventure was at Country World Adventure Park. The staff was extremely helpful and made the day thoroughly enjoyable. They handled everything regarding your harness and attaching you and detaching you at the start and stop of each zipline. The ziplines varied in distance, with the first couple being a warm-up for the big ones that lay ahead. Zipline number 6 out of 8 is the biggest, longest one at over half a mile long that involves starting at the top of an 80-foot structure. They actually have a horse at the end of this zip line to assist with the passengers that don't weigh enough to take them to the end of the run when it starts to incline up a hill. In addition to the zip lines, there are mango trees everywhere in the area, and it is encouraged for you to try the mangoes that are laying around. I initially picked a mango from a tree, but it was not ripe yet, so it was hard to bite into, but later found a ripe mango that was absolutely delicious. One word of warning is that this excursion does require a moderate amount of walking, and you will get winded. One person that we witnessed tapped out after 2 or 3 zip lines due to the walking and heat and was concerned about heat exhaustion. They do provide water bottles for you to have attached to your harness, so they do their part to ensure everyone has proper hydration available. For me personally, this was my favorite excursion of this trip, and maybe all of my trips. This was my first time ziplining on a cruise, and it was thoroughly enjoyable, and I would definitely do it again. Now that I thoroughly covered the 4 ports, let's jump back into the ship and the activities on board Liberty of the Seas. Liberty of the Seas offered activities that closely resemble other Royal Caribbean ships. You will find karaoke, trivia, live musical acts, spa services, live comedians, casino events such as slot and blackjack tournaments, ice skating shows, open ice skating in Studio B, Broadway level production in the Platinum Theater, which was Saturday Night Fever for this cruise, plus many, many other activities throughout. With regards to cruising, you will never be short on activities that are available. What we really love about cruising, though, is that even with so many activities being offered, it's completely up to the individual passenger to cater their experience, and if their desire is to sit by the pool and eat various food, then they can keep it as simple as that. I will say that for this cruise, the entertainers were very hit or miss. About 3/4 of the headliners in the Platinum Theater were very good and should be seen, but there was about a quarter of the time that the acts were old, had jokes that were out of date, and simply the act needs to be revamped or removed from Royal Caribbean's offerings altogether. To wrap up this video, I want to briefly summarize what we loved, disliked, and other topics that we were neutral on but wanted to mention. First, I want to talk about the things that we absolutely loved about this cruise. We absolutely loved the Dominican Republic, Taino Bay, which was the second day we went to Dominican Republic. That was the day that we did the zip line excursion. That was a very enjoyable experience. That's something that we would definitely encourage others to try when they go to this port. We also really loved King's Wharf in Bermuda, the first stop that we had. That was the day that we went to Crystal Caves, and then we explored on our own and went to Blue Hole Park. Again, that was something where if we booked through Royal Caribbean, we would have paid a lot more money. We chose to do it on our own, and the experience was just super memorable and something that we thoroughly enjoyed. We loved the main dining room during the second half of the trip. Like I said earlier in this video, the food quality just seemed to improve, and the level of the meals just seemed to get better as the trip went along. I mentioned as well, we really like trying the local restaurants when you stop at a port. Usually you get very authentic cuisine that is very good and something that we thoroughly enjoy when we stop at the various ports. We loved Labadee, Haiti. We loved the beaches. We loved the views. They're some of the best that we've ever seen anywhere on any cruises we've gone on. We really loved departing from Bayonne, New Jersey during the summer months. And we also really loved that the cruise was 9 nights long. This was our first time going on a cruise that was 9 nights. We typically go on a 7-nighter, which is the more common cruise length, but we really enjoyed the 9 nights, and just adding those 2 extra days really made the cruise feel exponentially longer. Now I just want to mention the things that we disliked about this cruise or areas that Royal Caribbean could maybe improve in the future. The main dining room during the first half of the trip. The first half of the trip, the MDR food just seemed very bland. We generally didn't like it as much as the food that we experienced in the second half of the trip. Some of the headliners in the Platinum Theater, I mentioned it in this video. About 3/4 of the time, the headliners were very good and we enjoyed seeing them, but there was about a quarter of the time where the acts just need to be revamped or replaced. Labadee, Haiti. Again, we mentioned this in the love column, but we're going to mention the disliked as well. So I guess Labadee was kind of like a love-hate relationship. But during Labadee, Haiti, where we loved the beaches and the views, we disliked the jellyfish larvae that were stinging us, flies on the uncovered food, and then the aggressive market operators. And the last thing that I'll list in the disliked category was the electrical outlets in the stateroom. It just would be nice to have them by the master bed so that you can keep your phone plugged in there rather than having to put it across the room. A couple of items that I wanted to mention that were in the neutral category. These were things that we experienced. They didn't necessarily impact our opinion of the cruise. They're just something to note. The once a day turn down service, again, I would prefer to have twice a day, but it didn't take away from the experience that we had on the cruise. It was still fine. We had once a day turn down service. Dominican Republic, La Romana, the excursion we did on that day, This was day one in Dominican Republic. There was nothing wrong with this. It was just something we were neutral on. It was a fine port. The excursion was okay. It just was what it was. And the last thing I wanted to mention was just the general need for the makeover on this ship. If you looked at our patio, it just had patchwork on it. The wall art that was throughout the ship, it just seemed like it was dated and could be better. And I've seen better on all the other Royal Caribbean ships. And just in general, the maintenance on board just seemed like it's due for a renovation or some upkeep. Now, this didn't take away from our experience. It's not going to interfere with the enjoyment that we have on the cruise, but just something to note that they could improve on going forward. I really hope this video was enjoyable for you. I hope that it provided some insight into our experience on this cruise, and I hope that it helped you for your future cruises and questions that you may have had regarding cruising with Royal Caribbean. Thank you, and I look forward to you watching future videos.